The rain in Harbor Glen doesn't just fall, it assaults. It hits the pavement of the Southbridge parking garage with a rhythm like angry static, a sound I know too well. It was just past 11 p.m., and the shift at the Wren had been brutal. My apron pocket was light on tips. My feet were aching, and my real job, the one that actually mattered, the audio tech gig, had cut my hours again. I'm Mara Quinn, 27 years old, though most days I feel closer to 40. Single mom, that's the label that sticks. My fingers fumbled with the keys to my 10-year-old sedan, my knuckles raw from scrubbing the bar. In the back seat, my daughter, Lila, was asleep, buckled into her booster, 6 years old and already braver than any man I've ever known. Her small face was relaxed in the dim yellow light, her breath fogging the window. Around my wrist, the strap of my old Tascam recorder was a familiar weight. It was my talisman, my anchor, a relic from a life I dreamed of, recording live sound, not just pouring whiskey for suits who looked through me. I slid the key into the lock and a hand clamped down on my wrist, not the one holding the recorder, the one holding the keys. Going somewhere, Mara? I froze. The voice was gravel mixed with cheap cigarettes. I didn't need to turn to know. I smelled the stale beer and damp wool before I saw him. There were two of them. The one holding me was big, a wall of faded tattoos and misery. The other one was smaller, nervous, wiry. They were from the Kovac syndicate. Everyone in Southbridge knew the name. You paid your tab, or they collected in flesh. I don't know what you're talking about, I said, my voice flat. I tried to pull my arm away. His grip tightened, grinding the bones. Don't play dumb. The big one. Mikhail grunted. Your old man. Rick. He skipped town. My blood went cold. Rick. A name I hadn't let myself think about in 8 months. The charismatic disaster who'd promised me the world and left me with nothing but debt and a broken heart. He's not my old manny, I spat. He's nothing. He's a problem. The wiry one, Sammy, hissed. He stepped closer, crowding me against the car door. A big one he took a loan, a substantial one, and you, sweetheart, you co-signed. I never signed anything. Oh, yeah, Mikhail laughed. A wet, ugly sound. He pulled a folded paper from his jacket. Even in the gloom, I could see the notary's stamp. I could see the looping, desperate forgery of my signature. Looks like your name to us. He took the cash, left you holding the bag, and Kovac. He wants his money. My stomach turned to ice. This wasn't a warning. This was a collection. I don't have it, I whispered. I work 2 jobs. I have maybe $200 in my account. That's a start, Sammy sneered, and his eyes darted to the back seat. My entire body went rigid. Don't you even look at her. He ignored me. He saw the backpack on the floor of the passenger side. It was pink, with a cartoon astronaut. Before I could react, Sammy yanked the car door open, grabbed the bag, and stepped back. No, I shouted. The sound echoed in the concrete cavern. Please, that's... What kid's homework? Sammy started to unzip it. It's her hearing aid, I screamed it, the word tearing out of my throat. She needs it, please. Just give it back. Lila had been in a minor accident 2 years ago, a driver who ran a red light. The physical damage was minimal, a few bruises. But the trauma had slammed a door in her mind. She developed acute agoraphobia, a fear of crowds and loud noises, and when the stress gets too high, she stops speaking. She uses her drawings, and she uses the sign language I've been desperately trying to learn with her. The aid helped ground her, helped her filter the world. A hearing aid, huh? Mikhail looked almost impressed. Expensive. Please, I begged, the adrenaline making me shake. Take my wallet, take the tips, just not that. Sammy held it up, dangling it from one finger. You want it? Come get it. I didn't think... I launched myself at him. Ooh. I was ready for the hit. I knew it was coming. I'd been hit before. I braced for the fist, for the concrete, for the sharp sting of pain. As long as I got the bag, I didn't care. But the hit never landed. Instead, there was a new sound, the sound of tires whispering over wet cement, a sound so quiet it was louder than the rain. A long, black coupe had glided into the space opposite mine. It hadn't been there a second ago. It was sleek, predatory, and silent as a shark. The engine wasn't running. It was breathing. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out. He didn't just get out of the car, he unfolded from it, a silhouette of impossible calm. He wore a long, dark trench coat that rippled slightly, as if he'd brought his own wind with him. He was young, maybe 30, with a face that looked like it was carved from steel and seawater, cold, sharp, and deep. He looked at Mikhail and Sammy. They froze, their petty bravado vanishing like smoke. Sammy's hand, the one holding Lila's bag, went slack. The man didn't look at me. Not at first. He just moved. He took 3 silent steps and stood beside me, angled slightly, a sudden solid wall between me and the 2 thugs. Then, his voice. It was low, a baritone that cut right through the hiss of the rain. It was quiet enough that only I was meant to hear it, but loud enough to stop the world. "Look at me," he said. My head snapped toward him. His eyes were the color of the harbor in winter. "You're not alone." Mikhail, recovering his nerve, puffed out his chest. "This ain't your business, Vale. This is Kovac." The man, Vale, finally turned his gaze on the thug. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't swear. He simply spoke. "Mikhail Petrov," he said. Mikhail flinched, as if slapped. "You live at 3400 Arbor Street. You're 2 months behind on payments to your own boss, a fact you've conveniently hidden." He glanced at the other one. "And you, Samuel DeLuca, you've been skimming from the port shipments. Kovac thinks it's a clerical error. I have photographs, time-stamped, of you loading the container last Tuesday." Sammy turned pale, a sickly green under the fluorescent lights. "So," Cashin Vale continued, his voice a soft, dangerous rumble, "you have 2 options. You can walk away from this garage and this woman right now, or I can make a call. And you can wait for the ambulance." The air was thick, suffocating. Mikhail was sweating, the rain mixing with the fear on his forehead, but Sammy was stupid, or desperate. With a choked yell, he dropped the backpack and lunged, not at Vale, but at me. A knife I hadn't even seen was in his hand, a dull blade flashing. Vale moved. It wasn't a fight, it was a correction. He intercepted Sammy's arm, his hand moving like a snake. There was a sound, a sickening, wet pop that my Tascam would have registered as a sharp, percussive snap. Sammy screamed, a high-pitched, awful sound. The knife clattered, thus, skittering across the wet concrete. Vale twisted, his grip precise, and shoved Sammy back into Mikhail. The wiry man collapsed, clutching his wrist, his face a mask of agony. Mikhail, to his credit, knew when the game was over. He grabbed his partner, his eyes wide with terror, fixed on Vale. We're gone. We didn't see anything. We weren't here." They scrambled back, half dragging the whimpering Sammy, and disappeared down the stairwell. The only sound was their panicked footsteps fading away. The silence that fell was heavy, broken only by the rain and the shuddering breath I was trying to control. I bent down and snatched Lila's backpack. Clutching it to my chest, my knees felt weak, but I locked them. I would not fall. Not in front of him. "I could have handled it," I said. My voice was rough. I turned to face him. He was watching me, his expression unreadable. A small, tight smile touched the corner of his mouth, a gesture that held no humor. "You've been doing that a long time," he said. It wasn't a question. He reached into the pocket of his coat and pulled out a card. It was thick, black, and completely bare except for 3 embossed words, Vale Maritime Group. I just stared at it. "Take it." I wiped my wet hand on my jeans and took the card. It was heavy. "My name is Cassian Vale," he said. "The men who just left, they won't be back, but Kovac will find someone else." I flipped the card over. On the back, there was a name and a number. Martin Shaw, ESQ, and under it, a title that made my skin crawl, Interstate Financial Crimes Commission. "He's a lawyer," Cashin said, anticipating my question. "The IFCC doesn't like forgers or the people who use them." He paused. his gaze intensifying. "They'll listen when I call." This was a threat and a promise, a life raft and an anchor, all in one. He was offering me a way out, but it was a way into his world, a world of steel and shadows. I don't take favors," I managed. "This isn't a favor. Miss Quinn, it's leverage." Before I could ask how he knew my name, a small sound came from my car, a click of the door handle. Lila, she'd woken up. The door creaked open, and her head peeked out. She was wearing her favorite raincoat, a bright yellow one with frog eyes on the hood. Her own eyes were huge, wide with fear, taking in the strange man, the rain, the lingering tension. Cashin's entire demeanor shifted, the steel softened, the coldness receded. He took a slow, deliberate step back, raising his hands slightly, palms out. He crouched down, slowly, so he was on her level. He didn't speak. He lifted one hand to his chest, then moved it forward, palm flat, safe. Then he tapped his thumb to his chin. "Mom." Lila's fear didn't vanish, but the panic in her eyes subsided. She looked from him to me. I nodded, trying to force a smile. He knew sign language. This man who moved like a weapon and spoke like a judge knew my daughter's silent language. He straightened up, pulling a large, black umbrella from his car. He opened it and held it out to me. "Go home, Mara," he said, using my first name like he owned it. "Get your daughter inside." I took the umbrella. The handle was warm from his grip. "What about the car ride?" I stammered, nodding at his coupe. "I'm not offering you a ride," he said, as if reading my mind. He knew I wouldn't take it. "I'm offering you shelter from the rain." He didn't press. He just stood there, letting the rain soak his expensive coat, watching me unlock my door and slide inside. I buckled Lila back in, my hands shaking so hard it took 3 tries. I started the engine. As the wipers kicked on, clearing the windshield, I looked at him one last time. "Tomorrow," he said, his voice carrying easily over the engine's hum. "Come to the Glass House Hotel, noon. I have something I need to return to you." He glanced at the pink backpack on my passenger seat. He hadn't just saved it. He'd used it. I just nodded, put the car in reverse, and drove out of that garage, my heart hammering a frantic, terrified rhythm against my ribs. I didn't look back. When I got home, after locking 3 deadbolts and checking on Lila, who was already drawing a picture of a tall, dark man holding a big umbrella, my phone vibrated on the counter. It wasn't a text. It was an email. The sender was listed as Bureau of Organized Threats Bot. The message was short, and it wasn't a request. "We are aware of your connection to the missing Kovac funds. Your cooperation is not optional. Await instructions. Sleep hadn't come. Sleep was a luxury, a relic from a life before Rick, before Kovac, before the impossible calm of Cassian Vale." I'd spent the night oscillating between blind panic over the BOT email and the metallic taste of adrenaline from the garage. The morning light felt thin, gray. I made Lila oatmeal, my hands moving on autopilot. She sat at our small, chipped kitchen table, carefully feeding her stuffed bear. Pip was a threadbare, one-eyed veteran of her childhood, her constant companion. He was her anchor. My Tascam recorder was mine. "Okay, Bug," I said, forcing a brightness I didn't feel. "Time for Charter Hill." Lila looked up, her expression serious. She signed, tired, "Mama." "I know, baby. Me too." I knelt and brushed the hair from her eyes. "But it's a good day. It's Tuesday. They have art on Tuesdays." She gave me a small, unconvinced smile and zipped Pip into her backpack, the same pink backpack I had fought for just hours earlier. The drive to Charter Hill Elementary was a crawl. Every car that lingered in my rearview mirror felt like a threat. Every person walking on the sidewalk seemed to be watching. The rain had stopped, but Harbor Glen felt damp and hostile. I walked her to the gate, the brick building looming. It was a good public school, the best I could get her into, but the yard was noisy, chaotic. Lila's hand tightened in mine. Her fear of crowds was a physical thing, a weight I could feel pressing down on her. "You're okay," I murmured, shielding her from the rush of kids. "I'll be right here at 3, not a minute late. Okay." She nodded, clutching Pip's arm where it stuck out of her bag. She gave me the sign for "I love you" thumb, index, and pinky extended, and then she was gone, swallowed by the crowd. I watched until she was inside. Every instinct screamed to pull her out, to run, to hide. But where my apartment was a rental, my car was 10 years old, my bank account was a joke, I had nothing but 2 dead-end jobs and a threat from a shadow government agency, and an invitation from a man who broke wrists without flinching. Noon, the Glass House Hotel. It wasn't in Southbridge. It was downtown, a spike of cold chrome and glass that reflected the gray sky. This was where the real money lived. The lobby was silent, vast, and smelled like expensive, sterile orchids. I felt like a stray cat, my jeans damp, my knuckles chapped. A man in a suit, who looked more like a bodyguard than a concierge, approached me. "Miss Quinn." I just nodded. "Mr. Vale is waiting." He led me to a private lounge, sectioned off by dark wood partitions. Cassian Vale was sitting at a table, not looking at the view, but at a small, black tray in front of him. He wasn't wearing the trench coat. He was in a perfectly tailored dark gray suit, no tie. He looked like a CEO, a shark who owned the tank, not just swam in it. "You came," he said. "It wasn't a question. You said you had something to return to me." He nodded, gesturing to the chair opposite him. I sat, my spine rigid. I wouldn't let this place, or this man, make me feel small. "When your bag was dropped last night," he said, his voice that same low, calm instrument. "A few items were displaced. I thought you'd want them back." He slid the small, velvet-lined tray across the table. On it were 3 things: my old leather-bound notebook, the one where I kept my sound mixing notes and Lila's drawings. My heart leaped into my throat. I thought I'd lost it. Next to it was the hard shell case for Lila's backup hearing aid. I checked my purse. The aid itself was safe, but the case was empty. The 3rd item was a simple, black memory card, the kind a photographer would use. "I don't recognize this," I said, my voice betraying a tremor. "It was tucked into the lining of the hearing aid case," Cassian said. "I believe it's the real reason Rick forged your signature, and it's why Kovach sent his men." I stared at the small piece of plastic. "What's on it?" "A ledger, encrypted, but not unbreakable. The complete transaction history for a shell company called Kovach Port Brokers. It's a laundry list of every dirty dollar they've washed through the harbor for the last 2 years. He leaned forward, and the sterile air between us suddenly felt charged. "It's leverage, Mara, enough to clear your name of that fraudulent loan, enough to make Kovach disappear, but only if it lands on the right desk." I looked from the card to his eyes. They were clear, direct, and utterly cold. "And I'm supposed to believe you're the right desk." The words were out before I could stop them. They were sharp, suspicious. "You knew their names. You knew their debts. You knew my name. You're a part of that world, Mr. Vale, the same world that put a target on my back." He didn't get angry. He didn't deny it. He just held my gaze. "I am the harbor, Miss Quinn, not the storm." The cryptic, perfect line hung in the air. He wasn't the chaos. He was the structure. The water that let the sharks swim. It didn't make him safer. It made him the most dangerous thing of all. "Why me?" I whispered. "Why help?" "Kovach is sloppy," he said, as if discussing a poorly run business. "He brings heat to the waterline. He's bad for the ecosystem. You were just in his way." Before I could process that, my phone vibrated, rattling against the table. It wasn't a text. It was a video call. "Lila." My heart stopped. It wasn't 3 o'clock. It was barely 12:30. I fumbled, accepting the call. Her face filled the screen. She wasn't at her desk. She was in the nurse's office, her face pale, tears streaking her cheeks. She wasn't making a sound, just breathing hard. Lila, baby, what's wrong? Are you hurt? She shook her head, her little hands flying up. Man, outside. She signed it twice, her movements jerky with panic, scared, watching. A man who, sweetie, a teacher. No, tall man, by the fence. And he looked. She struggled for the word. He looked at me. I was on my feet, knocking the chair back. I'm coming, right now. You stay with the nurse. Lock the door. Do you hear me? I'm coming. I hung up, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. I heard, Cassian said. He was already standing, motioning to the suited man in the corner. Tell Marcus to activate the Charter Hill surveillance route, full priority. The man nodded and spoke quietly into his wrist. I stared at Cassian. Surveillance route. I have interest near the school, he said evasively. It's time to go. As if on cue, my phone buzzed again. A new email from BOT. Change of plans. Your lack of communication is noted. St. Bridget's Community Shelter. Exactly 1 p.m. Come alone. Bring the memory card, or we will be forced to collect your collateral. St. Bridget's, the shelter where I volunteered, reading to kids, before my life fell apart. They knew where I went, where Lila went. They were using my life against me. They want the card, I said, my voice hollow. In less than 30 minutes. They don't want the card, Cassian said, his voice flat as he pulled his trench coat on. They want you. The Bureau of Organized Threats doesn't exist in any federal register. It's a phantom, a shell, just like the port brokers. It's Kovac, or his partners, trying to clean up their mess. I have to get Lila, I said, pushing past him. We get her together, he said, not asking. I'm not offering a choice, he said, holding the door. I'm offering a moving wall. You can use it or you can get run over. His black SUV was different from the coupe. It was a fortress. The ride to Charter Hill was a blur of terror. I clutched the memory card, which I'd shoved deep into my pocket, and the notebook. We pulled up to the school. The panic at the gate was thick. Parents were in the middle of their day, picking up kids for appointments. A normal Tuesday? And then there was me, climbing out of a $100,000 armored truck, followed by Cassian Vale. The whispers started instantly. I saw Mrs. Gable, the PTA mom, stop mid-sentence, her eyes widening. I saw two other mothers lean in, their hands covering their mouths. Is that Vale Cassian Vale? My God, that's Mara Quinn. What is she doing with him? Dangerous. I heard he owns the entire He's looking. I felt the heat of their judgment, the fear. In their world, I was now contaminated, a struggling single mom who had just allied herself with the city's biggest shadow. I swallowed my pride. It tasted like ash. I didn't care. I just wanted my daughter. I sprinted to the office. Cassian, a solid and silent presence just behind me. I signed Lila out, my signature a jagged mess. She ran into my arms, burying her face in my coat. Pip clutched in her fist. It's okay, baby. Mama's got you. We got her buckled into the back seat of the SUV, the tinted windows making the world outside seem distant. The safety was immediate, a bubble of quiet leather and thick glass. My phone vibrated. A text. Blocked number. St. Bridget's, 5 minutes, or your lease agreement evaporates by tonight. We know where you live. Miss Quinn, we know where she sleeps. A sob escaped my throat. My home. They were threatening our home. They're not giving me a choice. No, Cassian said from the driver's seat. They're not. He put the car in gear. As we pulled away from the curb, Lila, who had been staring intently out the back window, suddenly tapped my shoulder. I turned. What is it, Bug? She pointed down at the floor of the car, then pointed back toward our old sedan parked across the street. She signed, Mom, car, metal circle. I didn't understand. Cassian did. He stopped the SUV in the middle of the street. He got out, walked back to my beat-up sedan, and crouched down. I got out and followed him. He didn't even look under the chassis. He just reached into the rear wheel well and pulled something off. It was a small, black magnetic disc, blinking a tiny green light, a transmitter, a tracker. They hadn't just been waiting, they'd been tracking me since last night. They knew I was at the glass house. They knew I was here. Cassian looked at the device, then at Lila, who was watching, wide-eyed, through the SUV window. A flicker of something. Admiration. He looked back at me. She has a sailor's eye. The 10-minute drive to St. Bridget's felt like an eternity. The tracker Cassian had pulled from my car was a heavy, dead weight in his hand. He crushed it with one hand and tossed it onto the floor mat. They weren't just threatening me. They'd been on me for hours. They knew I was at the glass house. They'd been waiting. "Lila," I said, my voice tight, trying to sound calm for her sake. "We're going to see Mama's old friends at the shelter. We're going to meet someone, and then we're going to get ice cream." "Okay." She looked at me, her eyes too old for her 6 years, and just nodded, clutching Pip. "They're expecting the card," I said to Cassian. "Give it to me," he said, his eyes on the road. I hesitated, my fingers closing around the small piece of plastic in my pocket. It was the only thing keeping my head above water. "You have to trust me, Mara, or this doesn't work. Give it to me." I pulled it out and dropped it into his open palm. He didn't look at it. He kept driving with his left hand, while his right hand moved to his belt. He did something quick, a movement of his fingers too fast to follow. Then he held his hand out to me again. Lying in his palm was the black plastic shell of the memory card. "The chip is secure," he said, tapping his belt. "They're bullies, not technicians. They want the object. You'll give them the object." I took the hollow shell. It felt light, a fraud. St. Bridget's was a place of comfort for me. I'd spent dozens of hours in that reading room, the smell of old paperbacks and floor wax a familiar balm. Today, it felt like an execution chamber. Cassian pulled the SUV around the corner, parking half a block away. "I'll go in first," he said. "Count to 20, then follow. Bring Lila, stay in the main room. Do not, under any circumstances, let them move you to a private office." He was gone before I could argue. I counted. 20 seconds that stretched into a lifetime. "Okay, Bug, let's go." I walked in, Lila's hand gripping mine. The main room was mostly empty, just a few transients reading papers. Cassian was already there, sitting on a worn vinyl bench against the far wall, casually flipping through a copy of the Harbor Glen Gazette. He looked like any other person waiting, bored and invisible. I sat Lila in the children's nook, a small area with picture books. "Mama has to talk to a man for just a minute. Stay right here. Do not move." She nodded, her eyes fixed on the door. At 1 p.m. on the dot, the man walked in. He was exactly what I didn't expect. He wasn't a thug like Mikhail. He was soft, wearing a cheap blue suit that was shiny at the elbows. He looked like he sold bad insurance. The only thing menacing about him was the pin on his lapel, a stiff, ugly eagle with wings that looked more like knives. He scanned the room and his eyes landed on me. He walked over, his smile oily. "Miss Quinn." "That's me." "Agent Miller, Bureau of Organized Threats." He slid into the small wooden chair opposite me. "We're glad you decided to be sensible." He pushed a folded paper across the table. "This is a federal summons. You are required to turn over the stolen data." My hand, slick with sweat, went to my wrist, to my talisman, the Tascam recorder. I unclipped it from my belt, set it on the table between us, and pressed the small red button. A tiny light glowed. "For the record," I said, my voice surprising me with its steadiness, "please state your name and badge number for my attorney." Miller's smile faltered. "This isn't a deposition, lady. Just hand it over." "I have a few questions first." I picked up the summons. The paper was cheap. "This document cites the Harbor Glen 2nd Precinct. There is no 2nd Precinct. It's the Southbridge Division. And you've misspelled the name of the supervising officer at the main barracks." I was bluffing. I had no idea if it was misspelled, but he did. He flushed, a mottled red crawling up his neck. "This is a federal, a multi-jurisdictional matter." "Which statute am I alleged to have violated?" I asked, pushing the recorder an inch closer. "Federal terms. Please. I'm sure an agent of your standing knows them." Miller was sweating. He looked like a fish gasping on a dock. "You're obstructing." From across the room, Cassian's voice cut through the air, calm and clear. He hadn't even looked up from his newspaper. He was talking into his phone. "Mr. Shaw," he said, the speakerphone projecting the call. "I'm here at St. Bridget's. As we discussed, I have an Agent Miller from the BOT. I believe he called it, he's serving a summons that seems to have the wrong precinct listed." A new voice, crisp and sharp as broken glass, came from the phone. Martin Shaw, the IFCC lawyer. "Bought no such designation in the Federal Register. Mr. Vale. Ask the gentleman if he's operating under Title 18, Section 1951, regarding interference with commerce, or if he's just committing felony impersonation under Section 912, because the Interstate Commission takes a very dim view of the latter. We have 2 agents 5 minutes away." The fictional statutes hit Miller like a physical blow. He stood up, knocking his chair back. "The card," he hissed, dropping all pretense. His hand moved to the inside of his suit jacket. "Now, or we take the kid." He didn't get to finish the threat. The sound of squealing tires and roaring engines filled the street outside. It wasn't Martin Shaw. 2 heavy-duty pickup trucks, black and windowless, with no plates, mounted the curb and slammed to a halt, blocking the shelter's entrance. The doors flew open, and 4 men, dressed in black, piled out. Miller looked panicked. "No, wait, I have it." They weren't there for him. They were there for me. Miller was just the setup. This was the cleanup crew. Cassian was a blur. He wasn't running away. He was moving toward us. He crossed the room in 3 strides. "Lila to me now." He grabbed my arm and scooped Lila up with his other, pulling us back into the narrow alcove between 2 massive concrete support pillars that held up the ceiling. He shoved us behind him, shielding us with his body. The men burst through the doors. "Lila," Cassian's voice was a command, not a plea. "Cover your ears, lock it down." He flashed the sign, both hands clamped over his ears. Lila, my brave, terrified girl, immediately slammed her hands over her ears, screwed her eyes shut, and buried her face against my stomach. She was trained for sensory overload. "Kitchen," Cassian yelled at me. "Back door. Go." He gave me a shove. I grabbed Lila's hand and ran. We burst through the swinging kitchen doors, past a startled cook, and kicked open the rear exit into an alley. We spilled out directly into the chaos of the afternoon farmers market. Tents, tables of produce, people screaming. We were a pinball, bouncing off stalls. "They're in the market," a voice bellowed behind us. One of the thugs. He was close, breathing hard, yelling into a radio. "Heading south, the signal is blue tide, I repeat. Blue tide." My hand was still clamped around my Tascam. The red light was blinking. It was recording everything. The screams, the static, the password, blue tide. This way, left Cassian grabbed my arm, yanking me out of the main thoroughfare. He pulled us down a narrow, damp staircase between the shelter and the old cathedral next door, a staircase I'd passed 100 times and never truly seen. It led to a heavy oak door in the basement, locked. Cassian didn't slow down. He rammed his shoulder into it, but it was solid. He let go of me, pulled something thin and metallic from the heel of his shoe, a tension wrench. He jammed it in the lock. In 2 seconds, there was a heavy click. He kicked the door open, and we fell into the darkness. It smelled like old wine, incense, and stone, the cathedral crypt. He dragged us past dormant furnaces and stacks of forgotten hymn books in the furthest, darkest corner. He stopped. He knelt, ran his hands over the flagstones, and lifted one. Beneath it wasn't dirt. It was the flat, black panel of a safe. He pressed his thumb to a small, glowing scanner. A click. The heavy lid hissed open. A safe house, a bug-out bag. Inside, everything was neat, compartmentalized, a compact trauma kit, 2 burner phones in shrink wrap, a roll of cash, and a vacuum-sealed bag containing a small, gray hoodie, child-sized. He'd planned for this. He'd planned for her. He pulled out the hoodie and handed it to me. "It's dry. Put it on her. Now." My hands were shaking as I stripped Lila's damp raincoat off and pulled the warm, soft fleece over her head. She was shivering, but her eyes were clear. She looked from me to Cassian, who was scanning the dark hallway. She lifted her small hands. "Stay with Mom." Cassian's head snapped back. He watched her, and the steel in his eyes seemed to warm, just a fraction. He respected her courage. He met my gaze. The look held a silent, binding contract in the dust and shadows. He signed back to Lila, one clean, sharp gesture, always. "They found your car," he said to me, his voice a low rumble. "They breached the shelter. They won't stop at your apartment. You're burned." "We have nowhere to go," I whispered. The words felt like giving up. "Yes, you do." He closed the safe, replacing the stone. "We're done hiding. I'm taking you to the Spire." The Spire. Beacon Spire. My lighthouse. Rookhaven Pier. No one sets foot on it unless I bring them. We drove. Lila, wrapped in the anonymous gray hoodie, was finally asleep in the back. Pip clutched to her chest. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a cold, sharp clarity. "My car, the tracker, the dash cam." "My car," I said, the thought hitting me. "It's still at the school. They put the tracker on it, but I have a dash cam. It faces forward. It records whenever the ignition is on, and for 5 minutes after it's off." Cassian glanced at me. "When did you park this morning?" "Around 8:40 a.m., and we left just after 12:30 p.m. The man Lila saw was at the fence." "No," I said. "The tracker. They must have put it on last night or early this morning to follow me from home. That's how they knew I was at the glass house." "When did you get home last night?" "After midnight, maybe 12:30 a.m. Cassian was already on his phone, a different contact. "Marcus, I need eyes on a gray sedan, Mara. Your plate." I rattled it off. "It's parked on the street opposite Charter Hill Elementary. I need the dashcam footage pulled. Check the files from midnight last night until 1 p.m. today. I'm looking for any vehicle that parked or idled near it in that window. A man planting a device." We drove in silence, the only sound the rhythmic thump of the wipers. After 5 minutes, Cassian's phone buzzed. He put it on speaker. "Got it, boss," a new voice said. "Pulled the footage remotely. You were right. 04:17 this morning. A gray panel van. No markings, parked alongside. A man got out. Spent 30 seconds at the rear wheel well of her car. We got a perfect shot of his plate as he pulled away." "Run it," Cassian ordered. "Already did," Marcus replied, a hint of pride in his voice. "Registered to a holding company. Sunrunner Logistics." I saw Cassian's knuckles go white on the steering wheel. "Sunrunner," he said, the name tasting like poison. "That's Kovac," I whispered. "The Kovac port brokers." "It's his primary shell for port operations," Cassian confirmed, his voice deadly quiet. "The same name that's all over the ledger on this chip." He hung up the phone. He looked at me, and for the first time, I didn't see a shark. I saw a strategist. My dashcam had caught the van, my Tascam had caught the password, and he had the ledger. We weren't just prey. We turned onto Rookhaven Pier. The air was thick with salt and the smell of creosote, and at the very end of the long wooden pier, cutting through the fog, stood a single, tall, dark tower, a lighthouse, black stone and reinforced glass, standing against the gray, churning Atlantic, Beacon Spire. The SUV's tires rumbled over the old wooden planks of Rookhaven Pier, a sound like a low drumbeat. The pier was long, cutting straight into the churning gray water, and at the very end of it, the black stone tower of Beacon Spire rose against the sky. It wasn't a pretty place. It was raw, built to withstand a century of storms. The railings were thick iron, coated in a layer of rust. The wind here didn't whisper. It howled, carrying the sharp, briny smell of the deep ocean. Cassian used a heavy key, not a keypad, to open the massive oak door. The inside wasn't the sterile luxury of the glass house hotel. This was real. The main living space was the lantern room at the top, accessed by a short, wide staircase. It was a circle of thick, floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a complete 360-degree view of the Atlantic. The floor was worn, wide plank wood. A deep, comfortable-looking leather sofa faced a massive, soot-stained fireplace. The kitchen was part of the same open room, functional, with copper pots hanging from a rack. This wasn't a showpiece. This was a refuge, an anchor. Lila, still swimming in the gray hoodie, walked straight to the glass and pressed her hands against it, mesmerized by the angry waves. "It's safe," Cassian said, his voice quiet, as he locked the heavy door behind us. "The glass is 3 inches thick. The walls are solid stone. No one comes out here unless I bring them." I expected him to make a call, to summon his men, to issue orders. Instead, he took off his suit jacket, folded it meticulously, and laid it over a chair. He went to the kitchen and rolled up the sleeves of his white shirt. My eyes snagged on his forearms. As his cuffs pulled back, I saw them, faded, silvery lines that traced a pattern just above his wrist. They weren't accidental. They were old. But they had been deliberate, sharp. He caught me looking. He didn't hide them. "Honduras," he said, his voice flat. He was opening cabinets, pulling out an onion, potatoes. "About 9 years ago, my first solo cargo run, we were boarded." Pirates. The word hung in the air. He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. The man who had moved with such precise, devastating speed in the parking garage had been made, not born. He started to cook, with the same intense, focused energy he'd used in the crypt. He began chopping vegetables. He moved with an economy of motion, a competence that was almost as intimidating as his violence. He was making clam chowder, from scratch. Within an hour, the air in the tower, which had smelled of salt and ozone, was now warm, rich with the scent of thyme and cream. He ladled the soup into 3 heavy bowls and set them on the old wooden table. He didn't just hand Lila a bowl. He crouched down beside her, pushing the spoon gently into her hand. "It's just soup," he said. "Sailors eat it." Lila, my cautious, brave girl, looked at me. I nodded. "It's okay, you can eat." She dipped the very tip of the spoon in, blew on it, and took a tiny sip. Her eyes widened. She looked at the soup, then at Cassian, who was watching her, his expression unreadable. A slow, mischievous smile spread across her face. She raised her small hand and, with a flourish, signed the word, "Good." And I saw it. For the first time, I saw Cassian Vale actually smile. It wasn't the tight, humorless twist of his mouth I'd seen before. It was a genuine, unguarded lifting of his features, crinkling the corners of his eyes. It completely changed his face, making him look less like a harbor baron and more like a man. The tension of the day began to melt out of my shoulders. Just a little. We ate in silence. The only sound, the howl of the wind and the clinking of spoons. As the afternoon bled into a bruised, purple twilight, the rain began to lash against the glass. With a heavy, mechanical hum, the lighthouse beam ignited, a massive blade of pure white light, cutting through the storm, sweeping over the black water, briefly illuminating the distant, rain-shrouded skyline of Harbor Glen, and then moving on. Lila was captivated, but the energy of the day, the fear, was still buzzing under her skin. She was restless. I needed to ground her, to ground us. I pulled the Tascam recorder from my pocket. It was still on. I rewound it, listening to the muffled chaos of the market, the shout, "Blue Tide." I saved the file and put the recorder on the table. "Hey, Bug," I said, pulling out the notebook and pen he had returned to me. "Let's play a game. It's called Listen, Guess the Sound." I pulled out my phone and hooked it to the small portable speaker I kept in my tech kit. "I'll play a sound from my library. Lila. You draw what you hear, and you—" I looked at Cassian. "You have to guess what she's drawing." He raised an eyebrow, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. He left his soup bowl and sat on the floor with us, his back against the sofa. I started simple. I played the clean, high-frequency sound of a single drop of water hitting a metal sink. Lila listened, her head tilted, then furiously drew a faucet with a large, exaggerated drop falling. "A leaky faucet," Cassian said immediately. "Too easy." I smiled. I played the next one. More complex, the sound of bicycle spokes spinning fast, with the sharp, metallic click-click-click of the gear ratchet. Lila drew a circle, filled with intersecting lines and a small foot on a pedal. "A bicycle wheel," he said. "You're good at this," I said, surprised. "I listen." "Okay." I searched for a hard one. I found it the low-frequency, 60-cycle hum of a large industrial power transformer. Lila paused. She drew a big metal box on a pole, with jagged lines coming off it, the sign for electricity. "A ballast transformer," he said, "the kind they use for the high-pressure sodium lamps on the pier. The hum is slightly flat." I stared at him. As an audio tech, I knew that. But he wasn't just a suit. He didn't just run the harbor. He knew it. He knew its sounds. Lila beamed, proud that he had guessed her drawing. Cassian watched her, and the smile that touched his lips this time was soft. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a keychain. It wasn't a cheap piece of plastic. It was a heavy, dark forged metal, embossed with the shape of a breaching humpback whale. He held it out to Lila. "In the old maritime language," he said, his voice low, speaking to her, not me. "Whales are guardians. They know the deep. Safe paths. They mean you're protected." Lila touched the raised metal shape, her fingers tracing the whale's form. She looked at him, a long, assessing look. Then she turned, unzipped her backpack, and took out Pip. With serious, fumbling fingers, she untied the old ribbon from the bear's arm and attached the heavy, metal whale, Pip. Her constant companion now had a guardian. The adrenaline of the day was finally crashing. I saw Lila's eyelids droop. Bedtime bug. The tower had one main bedroom downstairs, which Cassian immediately offered. I refused. "The couch is fine. It's better. We're closer to the fire." And I didn't say closer to the only door. He understood. He didn't argue. He just went to a large old sea chest and pulled out thick wool blankets and heavy pillows. "I can get that," I said, moving to help. We both reached for the same stack of pillows. The space between us, which I had carefully maintained, evaporated. I was suddenly, acutely aware of him. I could feel the heat radiating from his chest. I could smell the faint, clean scent of his soap, buried under the salt and the rain. His fingers, calloused and strong, brushed the back of my hand as we both gripped the pillowcase. It was a static shock, a jolt that went straight from my hand to my chest, making my breath catch in my throat. I looked up. His eyes were on me, dark and intense. The sound of the wind, the sweeping light, the sleeping child, it all faded. There was just the 5 inches of air between us, the heat, and the sudden, suffocating tension. I pulled my hand back as if burned, clutching the pillows to my chest. "Thank you." I turned away, my heart hammering a new, unsteady rhythm. I began to make a small bed for Lila on the sofa, my hands shaking. "I hate this," I whispered, the words escaping before I could stop them. They were bitter. He was standing behind me, unfolding a heavy blanket. "Hate what?" "This," I said, turning to face him. "This feeling, being rescued, being a victim. I've spent 6 years, since Lila was born, since the accident, making sure I am never the woman who needs a man to swoop in and fix her life. I work 2 jobs. I am fine. And now I'm hiding in a rich man's lighthouse while a whole syndicate is threatening my daughter." He was quiet for a long time, his expression unreadable. He just watched me, letting my anger fill the space. "Saving to walk away is different from saving to stand beside," he said finally, his voice a low rumble. I frowned. "What?" "In the garage, with Mikhail and Sammy, that was just removing an obstacle," he said. "What happened today? At the school? At the shelter that was a choice?" I didn't come for you because you're helpless, Mara. I came because you were already fighting. You were just outnumbered. He took a step, not close enough to touch, but close enough to fill my vision. That line I gave you, you're not alone. It wasn't a platitude, it was a contract. My word, and I don't give it lightly. He paused, his gaze unwavering. It's still valid. If you want me to leave, I will. I will have my driver take you and Lila anywhere. A new state, a new name. The ledger chip is yours to do with as you please. You just have to say the word. He was offering me an exit, a clean break. The Mara from 2 days ago, the one who worked at the Wren and lived in terror of the first of the month, would have taken it. But I looked at Lila, sleeping soundly for the first time in days. Pip and his whale guardian clutched to her chest. I looked at this complicated, dangerous man who knew the sound of transformers and spoke my daughter's silent language. I didn't ask him to leave. I don't want to run, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I'm so tired of running. I want a normal night. Just one. What's a normal night, he asked. A normal night is I read Lila a bedtime story. I make a cup of hot tea. And we find a radio station that plays old jazz. Not the news, just jazz. A flicker of that smile returned. I can do that. I sat by Lila, reading from a worn copy of Goodnight Moon that was in the backpack. I read until her breathing was deep and even, until her small hand went slack around Pip. I tucked the wool blanket securely around her. When I stood up, Cassian was standing by the kitchen. He'd found a small vintage radio, and from it, the low, smoky notes of a saxophone were curling through the room. He held out a steaming mug. Tea, he said. I took it, my fingers wrapping around the warmth. We didn't talk. We just stood by the massive glass wall. 2 silhouettes against the storm. The jazz played. The beam of the lighthouse swept over us, then out to the Black Sea, then back. I was so tired. The cold from the glass was seeping into my bones. I must have shivered. I didn't hear him move, but a moment later, something heavy and incredibly warm settled over my shoulders. He was draping a large, heavy-knit wool sweater around me. It was his. It smelled faintly of him, of cedar and sea air. I slid my arms into the sleeves, which were far too long, and pulled the collar tight, burying my face in the warmth. I turned my head to look at him. He was standing right there, closer than I'd realized. His eyes, in the dim light of the lantern room, weren't cold. They were just steady. A fixed point. My heart, which had been a frantic bird beating against my ribs for 48 hours, finally began to slow. We just stood there, shoulder to shoulder, breathing in time with the ocean, in a silence that was more profound than any words. I woke up to the sound of the foghorn, a low, mournful bass note that vibrated through the stone floor of the spire. Last night, I had fallen asleep on the couch, wrapped in Cassian's sweater, to the sound of jazz and rain. Lila was a small, warm lump beside me, for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. I had felt normal. That feeling evaporated with the morning fog. When I opened my eyes, Cassian was already up. He was standing by the glass, not admiring the gray, dawn-lit ocean, but speaking quietly into his phone. The strategist was back. I slipped off the couch, careful not to wake Lila, and started the coffee maker. He hung up and turned to me, his face grim. That was Martin Shaw. The IFCC lawyer, I said, my pulse quickening. He analyzed the summons Agent Miller gave you. The paper stock, the printer ink. He walked over, accepting the mug of coffee I offered. The toner is a specific batch, one used by a single model of office printer, a model that Sunrunner Logistics, Kovach's company, bought 200 of last year. So, bought is Kovach, I said. It wasn't a question. The whole thing, the threats, the agent, it was all just him. It was, Cassian said, which means he's more desperate than I thought. He didn't just send thugs. He deployed an organized, pre-planned operation to retrieve that card. He's terrified. He walked to the heavy table. Where his rugged, encrypted laptop sat a piece of hardware I definitely hadn't seen last night. He unlocked his belt, and for a second, I was confused. Then I saw him press a small catch. A tiny, almost invisible seam opened in the thick leather. He slid out the real memory card, the one I had given him in the SUV. He slotted the chip into the laptop. The ledger was layer 1, he said, turning the screen toward me. It was what he'd promised, a chillingly neat spreadsheet of cryptocurrency wallets, dates and corresponding account numbers, millions, all flowing into Kovach port brokers, then vanishing. "It's damning," I whispered. "It's circumstantial," he countered, his voice hard. "It's numbers. A good lawyer could bury this in court for years, claim it was falsified, fabricated. But Rick wasn't just a thief. He was sloppy. He didn't just copy the ledger, he copied everything. Layer 2. This is what he died for." He clicked a file. It wasn't a document, it was an audio file. I leaned in, my audio tech instincts taking over. He pressed play. Static, a low rumble, and then a train whistle. A specific, 2-note blast. It was followed by a muffled voice. "Signal is blue tide. I repeat, blue tide." I gasped. That's the man from the market, the one who was chasing us." "And this," Cassian said, clicking to another timestamp on the same file, the same train whistle. A new voice, this one deeper, recorded in what sounded like a large, echoing space. "Blue tide is green. The ice is loaded. Move it out." My Tascam recorder had caught the password. This file was the operation itself. "Blue Tide is the name of their entire smuggling chain," Cassian explained, his eyes fixed on the screen. "Kovach doesn't just wash money. He moves the physical cash. It comes in, gets packed in ice under tons of legitimate fish cargo at Warehouse 12, and shipped out in refrigerated trucks. All under the Sunrunner Logistics manifest. The train whistle from the nearby freight yard is the all-clear signal." He looked at me, and I finally understood the stakes. This card doesn't just show the money. It connects the digital ledger to the physical crime. It's the whole case. It's everything. "So we give it to Shaw," I said, a wave of relief washing over me. "We give it to the IFCC. It's over." Cassian closed the laptop. The quiet click was deafening. "No." "What, Cassian? It's everything you said. It's the leverage." "It's a death sentence," he said, his voice flat. "Think about it. Mara, we were at St. Brigid's. Agent Miller fails. Within 5 minutes, a fully equipped, off-the-books tactical team storms the building. Not police, not feds. Kovach's private army." He turned to me. "How did they know? How did they know where we were? When we were there, the tracker was on your car at the school. They didn't follow us. They were told." My blood ran cold. "Told by who?" "The only other people who knew Miller was failing," Cassian said. "The IFCC. My call to Shaw was a test, and they failed. Someone on his team, or someone he reports to, has a direct line to Kovach. The Interstate Financial Crimes Commission isn't just investigating Kovach, it's protecting him." The floor seemed to drop out from under me. The safe harbor, the one official life raft he had offered, was a trap. "They're compromised." "Deeply," he said. "If we hand this chip to Shaw, it gets buried in an evidence locker. The file gets corrupted, and we both end up as a tragic accident." We were alone, truly, completely alone. The panic started to rise in my throat, cold and choking. I looked at Lila, still asleep, her small face peaceful. I would not run. I would not be a victim. I looked at the audio file on the screen. I thought about my Tascam, my skill. "Then we don't use the official channels," I said. Cassian looked at me, a flicker of curiosity in his cold eyes. "What are you proposing?" "We leak it, not to the 6 o'clock news. They're too slow. We go independent. I used to intern for an investigative podcast, Rust and Harbor. It's run by one woman, Sarah Jenkins. She's a bulldog. She operates on a shoestring, hates corporate corruption, and she would rather go to jail than give up a source. I used to mix her audio. She trusts me." I was pacing now, the energy returning. "We don't give her the whole chip. We give her the Blue Tide audio, the dashcam footage of the Sunrunner van, and just enough of the ledger to prove the link. She can't be compromised by the IFCC because she isn't in the IFCC. She'll break the story. The public will scream, and the real feds, the ones above the leak, will be forced to act. We'll be whistleblowers. Cassian was quiet for a long moment, processing the strategy. He nodded, slowly. It's a good move. It's clean. But it's not enough. Why? Because, he said, ledgers are just numbers. Audio can be faked. Kovac will issue a press release. Call it a smear campaign by a disgruntled former associate, Rick. He'll say you're a jilted lover trying to get back at him, to make it undeniable, to make it stick. Sarah Jenkins needs video. Video. Of Blue Tide in progress, of the money being packed in the ice, of the trucks being loaded at Warehouse 12. And you know when that's happening? I said. Tomorrow night, he said. They run the cash every Wednesday. I'm going to set a trap. I'm going to get her that video. How? I asked. You can't just walk in there. That's Kovac's fortress. I have men who... No, I cut him off. Your men look like your men. They look tactical. They look like you. They'll never get past the front desk. He stared at me, waiting. I can, I said. The words were out before I could stop them. I know someone who works there. Leo Martinez. He's a junior warehouse assistant. I knew him from a community college audio course. He's always complaining about the awful acoustics and the bad PA system. I can call him. I can tell him I'm scouting a new corporate event, a Sounds of the Harbor industrial recording, something artsy. Oh, he's dumb enough to believe it. He'll let me in. I can plant the mics. I can plant the micro cameras. I'll be in and out. The warmth from last night, the man who had smiled at Lila, vanished. The cold, steel-eyed owner of the harbor was back. Absolutely not. You said you need video, I shot back, my voice rising. This is the only way to get it without starting a war. I will not, he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous, quiet level, allow you to walk into the center of their operation. And Lila, he demanded, his gaze pinning me, you'll leave her. You'll risk orphaning your daughter for this. It was a low blow. It was meant to be. He was using my love for her as a shield. She stays here, I said, my voice shaking, but I would not back down. With you, or with one of your people. A nanny, a bodyguard, someone, this spire, it's the safest place in the world. She will be safer here, separated from me for 2 hours, than she ever was in our apartment with me. You know I'm right. He was angry. I could see the muscle flexing in his jaw. He was torn between the strategist and the protector. You're asking me to stand by, he growled, while you walk into the fire. I stepped toward him, closing the distance. I did the only thing I could. I put my hand flat on his chest. I felt his heart, a strong, steady, slow thump under my palm. It wasn't frantic, like mine. It was controlled. No, I said, looking him straight in the eye. I'm asking you to trust me, the same way I'm learning to trust you. I am not just a victim, Cassian. I'm not just a mother to be hidden. I am an audio technician. This is the one thing I'm good at. You have your harbor. I have my sound. Let me use it. We do this. Or we run for the rest of our lives. I am done running. He looked down at my hand on his chest, then back to my face. He covered my hand with his. His skin was warm, his grip firm. He was deciding. The silence stretched, filled only by the distant cry of a gull. He nodded. Once, a sharp, final gesture. Elena will be here in 1 hour. She's my best. She will not leave Lila's side. The relief and the terror hit me at once. We had a plan. We had to tell Lila. When Elena arrived, a tall, severe-looking woman with kind eyes who spoke fluent sign language, we sat Lila down. Mama has to go to work, I signed, my hands trembling slightly. A special sound job. You're going to stay here, at the lighthouse. With Elena, it's the safest place. Lila's face crumpled. She looked at me, then at Cassian, her eyes wide with fear. Cassian knelt in front of her. "This is a new game," he said, signing and speaking with deliberate calm. "A special code, just for us, me, you, and your mom." He held up his hands, his face serious. "This is hide." He brought his hands over his head. "This is call." He put his hand to his ear. "And this is wait." He held his palms out. "If Elena signs this, you do it, instantly. No questions. It's a game." Lila, my brave girl, watched him and practiced hide, call, wait. A solemn look on her face. It was time. I was packing my tech bag tiny binaural microphones, a roll of gaffer tape, 3 micro cameras the size of a button, and my Tascam. Cassian was leaning in the doorway, watching me, his arms crossed. His sweater was still draped over the back of the couch. "If this goes wrong," I said, zipping the bag. I couldn't look at him. If I'm not back, it won't. But if it does, Cassian, Lila." In 2 strides, he was across the room. He took my shoulders, turning me to face him. His grip was insistent, grounding me. His eyes were burning with an intensity that had nothing to do with strategy. "I give you my word, Mara," he said, his voice a low, fierce promise. "If that plan deviates by 1 second, if you are not walking out of that warehouse by 2 a.m., I will burn that pier to the waterline to get you out." My breath hitched. I believed him. "Okay," I whispered. "I need to call Leo. I need to set up the cover story." I pulled out my phone, my thumb hovering over Leo's contact. Just as I was about to press it, Cassian's phone buzzed on the table. A text. He looked at it, and his entire body went rigid. "What?" I asked. "It's Marcus," he said, his voice flat, all emotion gone. "He's been monitoring Kovach's internal comms." He read the text aloud. "Boss, we have a problem. Kovach found a mole. Internal chatter is hot. They're moving now. They're grabbing someone from Warehouse 12. My heart stopped. "Who?" Cassian looked up from the phone, his eyes locking on mine. "An assistant. They're pulling him out of his house as we speak. His name is Leo Martinez." I dropped my phone. It clattered, loud, on the stone floor. My way in, my cover, my one contact. Kovach had him. He knew. He was cleaning house. "He's not just cleaning house," Cassian said, his voice a razor. "He's panicking. They're moving the timeline up." He looked at the clock on the wall. "Blue tide isn't tomorrow. It's tonight." Leo was gone. The plan was dead. The next 4 hours were a blur of cold terror and motion. There was no time to think, no time to grieve the fact that my only contact was gone, probably facing the worst. Cassian didn't pause. He didn't reconsider. He just moved. He made 3 calls. He spoke in a code I didn't understand. "Marcus, Scenario 4. Execute. Now." And just like that, we were in a dark van, leaving the spire, leaving a stoic, armed Elena and a sleeping Lila. Now, I'm standing in the shadows of Warehouse 12, and Harbor Glen is a smear of sickly, sodium orange light. The air smells of low tide, diesel, and rust. This isn't the plan I'd agreed to. This isn't me as an audio tech scouting a location. This is me as an intruder. The tech is better than mine. Cassian's team had prepped me in the van. The in-ear receiver is a sliver of plastic, nearly invisible. The microphone is a tiny black dot, disguised as the head of a pin in a simple clip in my hair. The 3 micro cameras, the ones I was supposed to plant, were already in place. Marcus, or someone just as fast, had gotten in and out while we were at the spire. My job was no longer to plant. It was just to listen. To be the central recording hub. My Tascam was strapped to my back, under a borrowed work jacket. Cassian was high up, a shadow on a stack of shipping containers 200 yards away, overlooking the entire loading bay. The in-ear crackled, static, then his voice low and calm. "Whale to Quinn, sound check." My throat was dry. "Quinn here," I whispered, my voice sounding shaky to my own ears. I read you. 5 by 5. "Breathe, Mara," his voice commanded, a thread of warmth in the cold. "You're an inspector. You're annoyed. You're supposed to be here. Walk the perimeter. Get closer to Bay 3. I moved. My boots felt like lead, but I did it. The warehouse was a cavern of noise. The hum of generators, the clang of metal, the rumble of forklifts. It was a good cover. Then they came. 2 massive 18-wheeler refrigerated trucks, Sunrunner Logistics painted on the side, backing into the bay. They idled, their engines a low, vibrating threat. "They're on time," Cashin's voice murmured in my ear. The rear doors of the first truck opened. Men swarmed it. They weren't just loading, they were unloading. Pallets of what looked like fresh fish, packed in towers of crushed ice. No, they weren't unloading. They were adjusting. A big man in a hard hat, the foreman, was directing them. "Careful with that, move the ice, even it out." I crept closer, hiding behind a pillar, my Tascam recording everything. I saw it. Under a top layer of glistening mackerel, the ice was just a cover. Beneath it were plastic-wrapped bricks, cash, and small, black hard drives. They were hiding the payload in plain sight. The foreman was barking orders. He was agitated. He must have heard about Leo. I was trying to look official, as if I was checking the foundation for stress cracks, my hand on the concrete pillar. The foreman stopped yelling. He turned. He saw me. The noise of the warehouse seemed to fade to a single point. He was 30 feet away. He was staring right at me. He started walking. "He's made you," Cassian said. His voice was tight. "Don't run." My blood turned to ice. He was coming, his hand on his radio. "Hey, you, who the hell are you?" My mouth opened. No sound came out. "Quinn," Cassian snapped in my ear. "To your left, 2 steps. Now." I didn't think. I reacted. I took 2 shuffling steps to the left, as if looking at a different part of the wall. I'm checking the acoustic integrity," I stammered, the words sounding insane. "For the harbor board, vibration compliance." The foreman's eyes narrowed. He was 2 feet from me. He reached out, his hand a grimy bear paw, to grab my arm. Clang! The world vanished. A percussive, deafening noise, and every light in the warehouse went out. Total, suffocating blackness. The generators died. The shouting started instantly. What was that powers cut? "Quinn, hide!" Cashin's voice was a roar in my ear. "Get into the pallets, now! They're not alone!" I dropped, scrambling on my hands and knees. I could hear men running. A new light cut through the black. Not a flashlight, a thin, precise, red beam. A laser sight. It swept across the bay, painting a red line on the ice, the trucks, the men. Kovac didn't just have thugs. He had shooters. I dove, squeezing my body into a narrow, dark space between 2 massive wooden pallets. The rough wood snagged my jacket. My breath was a ragged tear in my chest. I heard heavy boots, not the work boots of the dock crew. These were quiet, tactical footfalls. They were hunting. Then, a sound from above, a soft thud, almost silent. "What was," someone started to say. A whoosh. A dark shape had dropped from the rafters. Silent as a hawk, it was Cassian. He hadn't stayed on the container. He was in the chaos. My phone vibrated in my pocket. The buzz felt like an earthquake in my tiny hiding spot. I fumbled for it, terrified the light would give me away. I pulled it out, shielding the screen with my body. The small, bright rectangle illuminated my shaking hands. It was a picture message from Elena. It was Lila. She was asleep in the wide bed at the spire, wrapped in the wool blankets. Pip was clutched under her chin, and the little metal whale keychain Cassian had given her was gleaming in the dim light. Below the photo, 1 line of text: "Safe harbor. We are waiting." A wave of not courage, but cold, hard resolve washed over me. I would not die here. I would not leave her. I took one, deep, steadying breath, and gripped my recorder. I was done hiding. A shing of metal pierced the darkness, a grunt, a heavy thud. I risked a look, peeking through a crack in the pallets. In the faint red glow of the emergency exit signs, I saw him, Cassian. He was fighting, not a dock worker. This man was dressed in black, moving with a fast, fluid, terrifying grace. He had a long, curved knife. Cassian was armed only with a steel pry bar he must have snatched from the wall. The man lunged. Cassian didn't block. He deflected, the knife scraping sparks off the pry bar. It was a dance, brutal and fast. The man was a professional, a foreign bodyguard, just as the outline had hinted. He slashed, aiming for Cassian's throat. Cassian ducked under the swing, brought the pry bar up, and slammed it into the man's elbow. I heard the pop, just like Sammy's wrist in the garage. The man screamed, the knife clattering. Cassian didn't stop. He reversed his grip and drove the blunt end of the bar forward, a single, devastating strike. The man went down and didn't move. Cassian stumbled back, breathing hard. He was framed in the red light. I saw his arm. A long, dark slash ran from his shoulder to his elbow. His jacket was soaked. He was bleeding. He was hurt. But the chaos was my cover. The foreman was screaming into his radio, his back to me. "The power's down. I've got a breach. Just get the truck moving. Is it green?" This was it. I crawled, low and fast, out of the pallets. I moved toward the refrigerated truck. The reefer unit, running on its own diesel, was still thrumming, blasting cold air. The pipes were vibrating. The foreman was standing right next to it, yelling, "We don't wait for the lights. Get it on the road. Tell them yes. Blue tide is green. The ice is green. Go, go, go." I slammed my Tascam with its contact mic. Flat against the vibrating, freezing metal pipe, the sound would travel perfectly. I got it. I got the green signal. I got the final piece of the audio puzzle. I was about to crawl back when the world exploded in blue and white light. Whoop, whoop! The main bay doors screeched open, flooding the warehouse. Sirens. "Harbor Security Board. Everyone on the ground hands where I can see them." It was them. The HSB. The cavalry. Sarah Jenkins' podcast must have placed the anonymous tip to the HSB, just as Cassian had planned. Kovach's men froze. The foreman dropped his radio. They were trapped. The lights, the guns, it was over. I felt a wild, hysterical laugh bubble in my chest. It worked. The Sunrunner truck's engine roared. The driver wasn't surrendering. He was making a run for it. The truck's headlights flashed, and I saw him, an HSB officer standing right by the exit. He looked at the truck. He looked at the other officers. And he stepped aside. He lowered his flashlight. He gave a short, subtle wave. My heart stopped. No. The truck engine screamed. It lurched forward, wheels spinning on the concrete, heading straight for the open door. The HSB officer was letting him go. He was dirty, just like the IFCC. The rot was everywhere. I saw Cassian's face. He was leaning against the wall, clutching his bleeding arm. He saw the wave. He saw the betrayal. And his face, which had been pale with pain, hardened into pure, cold fury. He looked at the escaping truck. He looked at me, and he made a decision. He didn't run at the truck. He ran toward the wall, toward a stack of wooden pallets and oil drums, right below the main sprinkler manifold. Cassian, no. He ignored me. He ripped a signal flare from an emergency kit on the wall. He struck it. The red chemical fire hissed to life. He threw the flare onto the oil-soaked wood. The whoosh was instant. A wall of orange flame erupted, climbing the wall, thick black smoke billowing. The truck driver slammed on his brakes, swerving to avoid the sudden inferno. Above us, the heat-sensitive sprinkler heads popped. It wasn't a trickle. It was a deluge. High pressure. Ice-cold water blasted down from the ceiling. It hit the open pallets. It hit the truck. The force of the water was like a fire hose, blasting the top layers of ice and fish off the cargo. And there it was, revealed, under the deluge, under the glaring blue lights of the HSB cruisers, money, bricks of it, plastic-wrapped cash, scattering across the wet concrete, hard drives skittering like black stones. I turned. The other HSB officers, the clean ones, had their guns drawn, their faces stunned. And just behind them, a woman with a press badge and a cameraman, Sarah Jenkins. Her camera was on, recording everything, the fire, the water, the money. "Quinn now." Cassian was there. He grabbed my arm, his grip like a steel trap. Despite his injury, he was dragging me away from the chaos, toward a small, dark side exit. We burst through the metal door, into the night. We were on an external iron staircase. And the rain started, a cold, hard downpour, mixing with the smoke. We clattered down the metal stairs, our feet ringing in the sudden quiet. Sirens wailed behind us. We hit the gravel. We were soaked, shadows running from the inferno, illuminated by the flashing lights. We weren't running from each other. We weren't running from a threat. We were just running, together, toward the dark van, toward the spire, toward the daughter who was waiting for us in a safe harbor. The van ride back to the spire was silent, a vacuum of noise. The only sounds were the tires hissing on the wet highway, the rhythmic thump-thump-thump of the windshield wipers, and Cassian's breathing. It was too controlled. He was sitting in the passenger seat while I drove, his injured arm held tight against his chest, his head leaned back against the seat. The adrenaline was gone, leaving a cold, sharp void. When we pulled onto the pier, Elena had the door open before we even stopped. The warm, yellow light from the lantern room spilled out onto the wet wood. It looked like the only safe place on Earth. Elena's eyes, calm and professional, immediately locked on Cassian's arm. The black fabric of his jacket was matted and dark. "Sir—" "Lila," he cut her off, his voice a low growl of pain. "Asleep. Safe. Never woke," Elena said, her hands already moving toward the large first aid kit on the kitchen counter. "Good," Cassian said. "Go, stay with her." Elena looked at me, a silent question. I nodded. She disappeared down the stairs to the bedroom. He shrugged off the ruined jacket, his face a mask of stone. The gash in his arm was long and deep, bleeding sluggishly. He'd taken the worst of the knife slash. He turned on the kitchen faucet, the water hissing, and prepared to wash the wound. The sight of it, the blood, the raw flesh, it broke the dam. The adrenaline that had held me together in the warehouse, that had driven us back, finally crashed. I didn't just shake. I vibrated. My teeth chattered. A sound, half sob, half laugh, tore out of my throat. It was the sound of the last 48 hours of terror. "I thought," I started, my voice unrecognizable. "When the lights went out, when he came at you with the knife, I thought I lost you." I was crying, not pretty tears, ugly, gasping sobs, the kind that come when you've held your breath for 2 days and can finally exhale. Cassian froze, his good hand, which had been reaching for a sterile cloth, stopped midair. He turned, slowly, his face pale under the kitchen lights. He looked at me, and the strategist, the harbor baron, the killer, he was gone. In his place was just a man, bleeding, looking at me as if I were the one thing he couldn't calculate. He didn't move. He didn't come to me. He waited. He was ceding control. I crossed the small space between us. I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew I had to. My hand, still trembling, came up. I didn't touch his wound. I touched his face. I laid my palm flat against his jaw. His skin was cold from the rain, rough with stubble. I felt the strong, steady pulse of the artery there, a thrum of life under my hand. It was an anchor. His eyes closed, just for a second, a flicker of surrender. "Mara," he whispered, his voice rough. That was all the invitation I needed. I rose on my toes, and I kissed him. It was slow. It was warm. It wasn't the frantic, desperate kiss I'd imagined in my darkest fantasies. It was a discovery. It was a grounding. It tasted of the ocean, of rain, and the faint, metallic tang of his blood. It was the taste of survival. My hand stayed on his jaw, holding him, while my other clutched the front of his shirt, anchoring myself. For a second, he was utterly still, just receiving it. Then his good hand came up. He didn't grab me. He didn't pull me closer. He cupped the back of my neck, his fingers tangling in my damp hair, his thumb finding the frantic pulse just below my ear. He held me, steadying me, supporting me. His mouth softened against mine, and the kiss deepened, a slow, shared breath that said everything we hadn't. We broke apart, but our foreheads stayed touching. I was breathing his air. He was breathing mine. "You're shaking," he murmured. "You're soaked." "You're bleeding," I whispered back. "The kit," he said, nodding toward the counter. We moved together, a new, unspoken rhythm. I grabbed the sterile water and the gauze. He sat heavily at the kitchen table. I began to clean the wound. My hands were still trembling, but the shaking had stopped. The adrenaline was being replaced by something else, a warmth, a focus. "You're a better medic than I am," he said, his voice tight with pain as I disinfected the cut. "I've patched up a lot of scrapes," I said. "Lila plays hard." I finished bandaging the arm. It was a thick, white wrapping, stark against his skin. We were a mess, soaked, covered in grime from the warehouse, smelling of smoke and rain. "We need dry clothes," he said, his voice quiet. He nodded to the old sea chest by the fireplace, the one he'd pulled the blankets from, inside. I found what I'd found before. Simple, anonymous, soft clothes, a pair of gray sweatpants, a dark, worn t-shirt. I found a similar set for him. We changed, not in front of each other, but with a quiet, mutual understanding. The armor of the night, the work jackets, the damp jeans, the boots was gone. When I came back out, wrapped in the soft fleece, he was already on the long sofa by the circular window, his back to the glass. The storm was still raging. The fire in the hearth was low, casting flickering orange shadows. The beam of the lighthouse swept past, a blade of white, then darkness, then white again. I didn't sit at the other end. I sat near him. The sofa was deep. I curled my legs up, pulling the heavy wool blanket over us both. The tension was gone, replaced by a heavy, warm exhaustion. We were quiet for a long time. The only sounds were the fire, the wind, and the low, distant groan of the foghorn. He was lying back, his eyes closed, the bandage a stark white in the gloom. I just watched him. "The salty threshold," he whispered. I frowned. "What?" His eyes opened, finding mine in the dark. "Your lips," he said, his voice a low rumble. "When you kissed me, they tasted like the ocean, like the salty threshold of the harbor." My breath caught. "And your hair," he continued, his good hand coming up, his fingers lightly, barely, touching the damp strands by my temple. The smell of it. After the rain and the smoke, it smells like the air after a lightning strike. Clean, dangerous. I leaned into his touch, a small, involuntary movement. My heart, which I'd thought had finally slowed, was hammering again, but in a different way, a low, heavy bass rhythm. I took his hand, the one that had held the pry bar, the one that knew my daughter's signs. I guided it, leading it to my back, over the soft fabric of the t-shirt. I just needed the pressure, the solid, grounding weight of him. "You're safe," I whispered, turning his own words, his own contract, back on him. His fingers traced the curve of my spine, a simple, respectful touch that sent a shiver through my entire body. It wasn't a grab, it wasn't a demand, it was a question. I answered by leaning back, settling against his side, my head finding the curve of his shoulder. His good arm came around me, pulling the blanket tighter. His lips brushed my temple, a touch so light it was barely there. I held my breath. The intimacy of it, the simple, quiet rightness of it was overwhelming. He felt the tension in me. He felt me stop breathing. He paused, his hand stilling on my back. He pulled back just an inch, just enough to look at my face. His eyes were dark, shadowed, asking if he'd crossed a line. A shaky laugh escaped me. I shook my head, a small, tiny movement. "Keep going," I whispered, but slow." A ghost of that smile, the real one, touched his mouth. "Slow," he agreed. The lighthouse beam swept the room, illuminating his face. He leaned in again, and this time, his lips found the sensitive skin just below my ear, tracing the line of my jaw. My hand came up, gripping the front of his shirt. Every pass of the light was a snapshot. The beam hit the glass, refracting, painting us in fleeting rainbows. His hand on my back, my fingers clenched in his shirt. The beam swept on, his mouth, warm and gentle, on my neck, my back arching, just slightly, under the soft fabric. The beam swept on, our breaths, mingling, a quiet gasp, the sound of my name, his voice a rough whisper, the sound of the ocean, the sound of the rain, the sound of my heart. It all became one single, overwhelming note. Later. I don't know how much later. The storm had quieted. The fire was just embers. We were lying, tangled in the blanket, my head on his chest. I could hear his heartbeat, slow and steady, a counter rhythm to the sea. His uninjured arm was a heavy, warm weight across my waist. "My father," he said, his voice a low rumble in my ear. "He taught me to row before I could walk. He said the ocean never lies. It will either carry you or it will end you. There's no in between." I was quiet, listening. He was giving me a piece of himself. The boy from Honduras, the one who learned to fight. "Lila," I whispered, offering a piece of my own. Her first concert, it was in the park, a free string quartet. She was 3, just after the accident. She couldn't hear the high notes, but the cello. I smiled into the darkness. She walked right up to it. She put her little hand flat on the wood. She felt the vibration. She just stood there, mesmerized. She looked back at me, and she signed Big Music. It was the first time I realized she wasn't broken. She just heard the world in a different way. That's why I keep the Tascam, to try and capture the world she can feel. He was silent for a long time. His hand, which had been resting on my waist, moved, his fingers gently tracing my shoulder. He understood. He was the water. I was the sound. He shifted, pulling me closer, his lips brushing my hair. "My harbor," he whispered. The words sank into my skin. It wasn't a rescue. It was a destination, a safe port in a storm I had been navigating alone for so long. I closed my eyes. I felt the steady rise and fall of his chest. The lighthouse beam swept past, illuminating the room, then leaving us in the warm, safe dark. "Tomorrow," I whispered back, the words coming from a place I didn't even know existed. "Tomorrow, just call me what you want." I woke up to the sound of gulls and the feeling of warmth. I was still on the couch, tangled in the heavy wool blanket, my head on Cassian's chest. His good arm was still draped over me, a solid, protective weight. The storm had passed, leaving the spire in a pocket of profound silence. I remembered the kiss. I remembered his whisper. My harbor. I remembered my own answer. "Tomorrow, just call me what you want." I felt for the first time in my 27 years, completely safe. The feeling lasted for about 15 seconds. Cassian was already awake. I felt his chest rumble as he spoke, his voice low, not to me, but to his phone. "She's live." I sat up, pulling the blanket around me. The sun was just breaking over the gray water, painting the room in pale gold. Cassian was already dressed, his injured arm in a sleek black sling. On his laptop, a web page was open. The Ruston Harbor podcast, Sarah Jenkins' face, grim and determined, stared out from the thumbnail. The episode, posted at 6 a.m., was titled "Blue Tide the Harbor Glen Laundry." He pressed play. Sarah's voice, the one I knew from mixing her audio, was sharp as a razor. "Good morning. Harbor Glen, for 2 years. We've been told the story of a revitalized waterfront. This morning, we have audio and video evidence that suggests our harbor isn't being revitalized. It's being robbed." Then, my audio, the recording from my Tascam, the chaos, the shout, "Signal is blue tide." Then, the video. It wasn't just her cameraman's footage. It was the body cam footage from one of the clean HSB officers. The fire, the water, the sprinklers hitting the pallets, and the money. Bricks of plastic-wrapped cash scattering across the wet concrete. The city went insane. By 8 a.m., every local news channel was playing the clip. By 9, the IFCC had called a press conference. Lila was awake, sitting at the table with Elena, the two of them building a tower out of seashells, blissfully unaware of the inferno that had just been unleashed. I watched the television, my stomach churning. Martin Shaw, Cassian's IFCC lawyer, was at the podium. The Interstate Financial Crimes Commission has had an ongoing, classified investigation into Sunrunner Logistics, he said, his face a mask of bureaucratic calm. Then the screen split. A new press conference. A new man. His podium bore the seal of that fake eagle I'd seen on Miller's lapel, the one from St. Bridget's. The Bureau of Organized Threats, the man announced, has primary jurisdiction over this matter. We demand the IFCC stand down and turn over all evidence. I stared. They're real bot-y. No, Cassian said, his voice a low growl. He was pacing by the window. They're a phantom. Kovac is using his political markers. He's forcing his allies in the city to publicly legitimize the very agency he faked. Look. He pointed to the screen. They weren't fighting over the crime. They were fighting over the evidence. The IFCC wants to bury it in a vault, Cassian analyzed, his voice cold. The BOT wants to destroy it. They're fighting for the shovel. He turned to me, and the look in his eyes made my blood run cold. And you, Mara, are the one they're both going to blame. You aren't a whistleblower. You're a co-conspirator. The person who illegally distributed the data. They're going to tie you up in court for the rest of your life. They're going to put you in a cage. My safe harbor was suddenly a prison. Before I could even process the legal trap, the news cut to a new feed. Live. Mr. Kovac, can you comment on the allegations? There he was. Kovac. He wasn't in handcuffs. He was in a perfectly tailored suit, standing in front of the Sunrunner Logistics logo. He looked outraged. He looked like the victim. This is a vicious, coordinated smear campaign, Kovac said, his voice booming with false sincerity. A fabrication by a disgruntled former associate, Rick, and his accomplice, Miss Mara Quinn. My name. He said my name. An image flashed on the screen. It was me, years ago, at a staff party at the Wren. I was laughing, and in the photo, someone had digitally inserted Rick, his arm around my shoulder. It looked intimate. It looked conspiratorial. This woman, Kovac said, pointing at my face, a known associate of Cassian Vale, his mistress. She helped fabricate this audio. She helped doctor this video. In a pathetic attempt to help Mr. Vale seize control of my legitimate port operations. The word hit me like a physical slap. Mistress? It wasn't just a smear. It was an erasure. It took my skill, my terror, my fight for my daughter, and reduced it all to a sordid transaction. I wasn't a technician. I wasn't a mother. I was just a rich man's property. I felt the blood drain from my face. I looked at Cassian. He wasn't angry, and he was beyond anger. His face was a mask of such cold, pale fury that it was terrifying. The man who had gently patched himself up last night was gone. The harbor baron was back. He turned off the television. The room went silent. We're leaving. Wow, he said. What? I was shaking. We can't. They're hunting me. Elena, he called. Elena was instantly at his side. Lock this spire down. No one in or out. Lila stays with you. Do not, under any circumstances, leave this room. He turned to me. Last night, he said, his voice low, I called you my harbor. Kovac wants to define you. He wants to put you in a box. Fine. We'll give them a new definition. We didn't take the van. We took the black coupe, the Shark. We drove from the quiet isolation of the pier straight into the heart of the media circus. He pulled up in front of the Vale Maritime Group headquarters. It was a nightmare. 100 reporters, cameras, microphones, all screaming my name. Mara, is it true? Mr. Vale, how long has she been your mistress? Did you fake the data, Miss Quinn? The noise was a physical wall. It was the parking garage. It was the schoolyard. It was every fear I'd ever had, amplified. I froze, my hand on the door handle, unable to move. Cassian got out, and he didn't look at them. He walked around the car and opened my door. He held out his good hand. Look at me, he commanded. his voice cutting through the din, the same words he'd used in the garage. I took his hand. He pulled me out, not behind him, but to his side. The flashbulbs were blinding. I flinched, raising a hand to shield my eyes. He didn't. He stood tall, a bulwark against the storm of noise. He saw me flinch. He saw them yelling at me. In one smooth, deliberate motion, he unbuttoned his suit jacket, the one that wasn't covered in blood. He slipped it off his shoulders and, ignoring his own injury, draped it over mine. It was a public declaration. It was a shield. It was ownership, but not the kind Kovac had implied. It was protection. The shouting died, replaced by a frantic clicking of cameras. He stepped forward to the microphones, his eyes sweeping over the crowd. "Miss Quinn," he said, his voice a low, clear broadcast, "is not my associate. She's not my mistress." He paused, letting the silence stretch, letting every camera find him. "She," he said, and his eyes found mine, "is my family." He put his hand on the small of my back and guided me through the stunned crowd into the lobby. As the heavy glass doors hissed shut, Martin Shaw, the lawyer, was waiting. He nodded once at Cassian. "It's done," Cassian said to me, his voice quiet as we walked toward the private elevator. "What's done?" "The petition. Shaw didn't just file it with the IFCC. He filed it with the Bureau of Maritime Integrity. It's a small, independent city watchdog. They hate Kovac, and they are not on his payroll." He pressed the button. "As of 10 minutes ago, they've granted you full, classified witness protection status. Your name is officially shielded. Kovac just held a press conference smearing a protected federal witness. He just buried himself." I could have cried from relief. For a few hours, there was a lull. The narrative shifted. Cassian's family declaration was the only thing playing on the news. That night, Marcus sent Cassian a picture. It was a traffic feed from a highway in Southbridge. My neighborhood, the massive electronic billboards, the ones that usually sold beer or insurance, had been hacked. They were black, with 5 simple white words. "Thank you, whistleblower." "You see," Cassian said, a small, rare smile touching his lips, "you're not alone." The moment of peace shattered when Cassian's secure phone buzzed. Not a call, a text. He read it, and all the color, all the warmth, all the victory drained from his face. "Cassian, what is it? What's wrong?" He looked up at me, his eyes hollow. He's lost. He knows it. The media, the law, he's lost the public game. So he stopped playing. My stomach dropped. What did he do? "He just put out a contract," Cassian said, his voice flat, dead. "Not through the media, through his own network, an open bounty, $500,000 for you." I grabbed the table to steady myself. $500,000. "But that's not," Cassian swallowed, his jaw tightening so hard a muscle jumped. "That's not the main prize." "Cassian, $1 million, he whispered, his voice thick with a rage so profound it was almost silent. "For Lila." I couldn't breathe. My daughter, my baby, a price on her head, a target. I stumbled back, my hand over my mouth. "We have to run," I choked out, the tears blurring my vision. "Like you said, a new state, new names. We have to go now." "No." His voice was iron. "But they're hunting my child." "We run," he said, grabbing my shoulders, his grip grounding me. "And we will be looking over our shoulders every single day for the rest of our lives. We will never be free. She will never be safe. There is only one way this ends. We don't run. We don't hide. We cut the head off the snake." "How? By starting a war?" "No, by ending one." His eyes were blazing. "He's attending the Harbor Glen Children's Fund Gala tomorrow night. It's his pet charity. He'll be there, kissing babies, looking like a saint. The mayor will be there. The city council. Everyone who's ever taken $1 from him." "You can't be serious. You want to walk in there?" "No," he corrected. We are going to walk into that gala, onto his territory in front of the entire city. No more shadows, no more backroom deals." We are going to expose him so completely, so publicly, that not even his allies at the IFCC or his phantom bot can save him. We drag him into the light and we let the city watch him burn. It was the most insane, terrifying plan I had ever heard. It was walking into the lion's den. But he was right. Running meant Lila would always be a target. I pulled his jacket, my jacket tighter around my shoulders. I stood up straight. Okay. My voice didn't even shake. I'll go. I'll stand right next to you. I met his gaze. The harbor baron, the killer, the man who had called me his family. But I'm not doing it for your image, I said. And I'm not doing it for your harbor. I'm doing it for every single mother in Southbridge who's ever been bullied by a man like Kovac. I'm doing it so my daughter never, ever has to hide again. The Aurelia Conservatory wasn't a building. It was a fantasy. A massive dome of glass and white steel arching over a jungle of exotic plants, all suspended above the glittering lights of Harbor Glen. A string quartet was playing Debussy, the high, clear notes drifting over the murmur of the city's elite. The air smelled of damp earth, expensive perfume, and old money. It was the most beautiful cage I'd ever seen. I feel like a target, I whispered. You are, Cassian said, his voice a low vibration by my ear. But so am I. Tonight, we're just the better-dressed ones. He was in a minimalist black tuxedo, the white bandage on his arm replaced by a sleek, black sling, making the injury look like a deliberate, dangerous accessory. I was in a dress his team had provided, a simple sheath of dark, midnight blue silk that felt less like clothing and more like armor. It was the color of the harbor just before dawn. We were walking into the lion's den, and I had never been more terrified in my life. The hardest part had been saying goodbye to Lila. We had left her, not just with Elena, but with two of Cassian's men, shadows in suits who didn't speak, but just watched. They were in a secure logistics office 2 floors above the gala, a room with reinforced doors and its own elevator. Lila hadn't cried. She had sat on the floor, clutching Pip, while Elena taught her a new sign. She'd looked up at me, her small fingers moving with serious concentration. Brave. She was practicing. She was being brave for me. I kissed her head, my throat closing. I love you, Bug. We'll be back before you know it. We're just going to a party. Now, standing under the glass dome, that party felt like a battlefield. Kovac was already there, holding court by the massive fountain. He wasn't the man from the warehouse, or the thug from my nightmares. He was Daniel Kovac, philanthropist. He was laughing, shaking hands with the mayor, his arm draped around a small, sweating man I recognized from the news, Councilman Rhodes, a known Kovac puppet. Kovac saw me, his eyes raked over me, then landed on Cassian. His smile was a flash of white teeth, a predator's greeting. He knew we were here. He was expecting us. The room was buzzing. The rumors, the news conferences, Cassian's family declaration had made us the center of the storm. Ma'am, sir? A man in a crisp dark blue uniform stepped in front of us. He had the same stiff, ugly eagle pin on his lapel. The Bureau of Organized Threats. They weren't just a phantom, they were running security. We have a slight security flag, the man said, his eyes on me. We just need to escort you to a private room to verify your identification. It will only take a moment. This was it, the move, the attempt to separate me. My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked at Cassian. He didn't even look at the agent. His gaze was fixed on Kovac, across the room. His good hand found mine, his fingers lacing with mine, a grip of warm steel. Just look at me, he murmured, his voice for me alone. The world, the Debussy, the agents, the staring crowd shrank to a single, fixed point. Him. His eyes, the color of the harbor in winter, were locked on mine. The promise from the garage, you're not alone. She stays with me, Cassian said, his voice not loud, but carrying a finality that made the agent flinch. The agent opened his mouth, but Cassian was already moving, pulling me gently with him, walking right past the man as if he were a piece of furniture. We didn't run. We took a glass of champagne. We mingled. We became part of the party. two sharks circling the same bait as Kovac. The standoff lasted for an hour of fake smiles, of polite nods, of my skin crawling every time I felt Kovac's gaze on me. Then the lights began to dim. The orchestra swelled, a signal for the main presentation. The mayor was walking toward the podium. Under the cover of the dimming lights, I saw it. Kovac, still smiling, gave a short, sharp nod to Councilman Rhodes. Rhodes immediately turned and walked, not toward the stage, but toward the side exit, the exit leading to the service elevators, the exit leading to the logistics office. The BOT agents who had tried to stop me were moving, too, and they were joined by 3 other men in suits that were just a little too tight, their hands in their pockets, the team from the warehouse. My blood turned to ice. I gripped Cassian's arm. "Cassian," I whispered, my voice choking. "The stage. They're not coming for me. They're going for the stairs. They're going for Lila." He looked. He saw the movement. His entire body went rigid. In the same instant, the phone I was clutching in my free hand vibrated, a silent, frantic buzz. I looked down. The screen was dark, but on it, a tiny icon of a whale was flashing a 3-part LED sequence, just as we'd practiced. Hide. Call. Wait. "Lila, Elena, they'd seen them. They'd hit the panic button." Cassian didn't hesitate. He wasn't the harbor baron. He wasn't my date. He was a weapon. He squeezed my hand once. "Stay visible," he breathed, and he was gone. He moved through the dim, crowded room like a ghost. He didn't run. He flowed, intercepting the group at the corridor door. I saw him block the entrance. A single, dark silhouette against the light. I saw the first man try to push past him. I saw Cassian's one good arm move, a blur, and the man went down. The fight had begun. Kovac was watching it all, a small, triumphant smirk on his face. He'd done it. He'd separated us. Cassian was trapped in a hallway, fighting his men, and I was alone, exposed in the center of the room. He thought he'd won. He'd made one mistake. He'd left me alone, but he'd left me right next to the stage. He'd forgotten who I was. I wasn't a mistress. I wasn't a victim. I was an audio technician. The orchestra finished its piece. The conductor turned, bowing to the polite applause. The mayor was adjusting the microphone at the podium. I moved. I walked past the shocked donors. I walked past the stunned councilman who had frozen when the fight broke out. I walked right up onto the stage. The mayor looked at me, his eyes wide. "Ma'am, this is not—" I didn't look at him. I looked at the orchestra's main soundboard. I looked at the lead conductor's microphone, a heavy, sensitive condenser mic. I grabbed it. A high-pitched screech of feedback blasted through the conservatory, silencing the entire gala. Everyone froze. Every eye was on me. "Good evening," I said, my voice shaking but amplified, booming through the glass dome. Kovac's head snapped toward me, his smile vanishing, replaced by a mask of pure fury. I reached into the slit pocket of my dress. I pulled out my Tascam recorder. I slammed the line-out jack into the line-in port on the mixing board. I was asked to provide a little sound for tonight's presentation, I said, my heart hammering. "It's a recording I took from Warehouse 12. I hit play. Static, the roar of a warehouse, and then my recording, crystal clear, echoing off the glass ceiling. "The signal is blue tide," I repeat, "blue tide." A collective gasp went through the room. "But that's just the intro," I said, my voice gaining strength. I pulled the other thing from my pocket, the real memory card, the ledger. I held it up. "My name is Mara Quinn, and I was told this was a gala for the children of Harbor Glen, so I'd like to read a list of the donors who've been stealing from them." Kovac was screaming, "Security, get her off the stage, turn off that mic." But the sound guy was frozen. The BOT agents were busy with Cassian. I was alone, and I was loud. I cued the second track on my Tascam, the kill shot. "Blue tide is green, the ice is green. Go, go, go." That, I shouted over the recording, was the sound of Sunrunner Logistics, owned by Daniel Kovac, moving millions in illicit cash. And here, I read from the printout I'd made of the ledger. Are his partners Harbor Maritime Services, Apex Transport, Clearwater Imports. Pandemonium. A woman in a diamond necklace stood up. I'm pulling my funding, effective immediately. Another man, a banker, was on his phone. Sell all holdings in Sunrunner. Now. Councilman Rhodes wasn't walking. He was running for the exit. Kovac was trapped. He looked at the mayor, his eyes pleading. The mayor, his face pale as a sheet, looked at the cameras, not the gala cameras, the news cameras. Sarah Jenkins. She was here. Her cameraman's light a bright, accusing star. The mayor looked away from Kovac. He looked at a man standing by the main entrance, a man in a simple, gray suit. He gave a short, sharp nod. A new team entered the room, not BOT, not HSB. Their windbreakers said City Integrity Team, a civilian-funded internal affairs unit, the one group Kovac couldn't buy. They moved, not toward the fight, but straight for the stage, straight for Kovac. Get your hands off me, Kovac roared. His mask was gone. The philanthropist was gone. This was the thug, the animal. He saw the cameras, the flashes popping, and he lunged. He wasn't lunging at me. He was just trying to escape. Flash, pop, flash. Every camera in the room captured it. The mask of civility ripped away. The face of a cornered, desperate criminal. Daniel Kovac, the lead agent said, his voice hard as he snapped the cuffs on. You are under arrest for conspiracy, money laundering, and the tampering of a federally protected witness. The BOT agents in the hallway, they just vanished. The moment the integrity team moved in, they melted back into the crowd, their cheap suits and fake eagles dissolving into the panic. The room was a chaos of shouting and applause. I stood there, shaking, still clutching the microphone. My Tascam was on the podium, its little red light still blinking, recording, always recording. And then I saw him. He was walking out of the corridor. His tux was torn. His good hand was raw. But he was walking. And in his arms, he was carrying Lila. She was safe. She was wearing the little dress Elena had for her, and she was clutching Pip. Her eyes scanned the chaotic room, found me, and she lit up. I dropped the microphone. It thudded on the stage. I ran. I didn't care about the broken glass, the donors, the mayor. I launched myself off the stage and ran to them. Cassian saw me. He opened his good arm, and I slammed into them. He held us. His one arm was strong enough. He held me, and he held our daughter. Pulling us both against his chest, he held his family. Lila's little arms wrapped around my neck, and I buried my face in her hair. She smelled like soap and safety. She pulled back just enough to press her small hand to my chest. Brave, Mama? The cameras were still flashing. The sound of applause was real, not just polite. Cassian held us tight, shielding us from the worst of the lights. He leaned his head down, his lips brushing my ear, his voice a low, rough promise in the middle of the storm. Tomorrow, he whispered, his voice thick with an emotion I couldn't name. Tomorrow. I'm calling you what you dared me to wife. The next morning at Beacon Spire, the world was silent. The storm, the sirens, the gala, the chaos of the last week, it all felt a lifetime away. I woke up on the couch, tangled in the heavy blankets, Cassian's sweater still wrapped around me. He was already up, standing by the massive circular window. I got up and stood beside him. The Atlantic, which had been a churning, angry gray, was now a sheet of flat, polished glass, the color of a pale blue sky. The air was cold, clean, and still. Lila was already awake. She wasn't with Elena. She was with Cassian, sitting on his shoulders, her small hands braced on his head, her face pressed to the glass. Watching a distant container ship, he was holding her steady with his good arm. It's quiet, I whispered, not wanting to break the spell. The storm is over, he said. He wasn't just talking about the weather. On the small television in the kitchen, the news was playing on mute. The Chiron told the whole story. Kovacs indicted racketeering, money laundering, Sunrunner logistics assets seized by city, phony bot agency traced to Kovacs payroll, Councilman Rhodes resigns. It was done. He was gone. The fake charges against me, the debt, the signatures, it all evaporated, like fog in the morning sun. My phone rang. It wasn't an unknown number. It was the head of the city integrity team, the man in the gray suit from the gala. "Miss Quinn," he said, his voice crisp and professional. "Your audio evidence was the key. We've never had a cleaner case. I'm calling, unofficially, to see if you'd be interested in a position. The city needs a new independent audio forensics consultant." My breath hitched. A real job, a career, using my skill. "I am," I said, my voice steady. "But I have one condition. My daughter, Lila Quinn, her name, her identity, it must be permanently shielded, wiped from every file. She was never involved." "Miss Quinn," the man said, a note of respect in his voice, "as far as this office is concerned, she never was." I hung up, a slow smile spreading across my face. I looked at Cassian. He was watching me, a look of quiet pride in his eyes. "Looks like I'm employed," I said. "As are you," he said, nodding to his own laptop, where he'd been on a video call with a dozen lawyers for the last hour. "I've just finalized the restructuring." Restructuring. Vale Maritime Group is clean, as of 10 minutes ago. I've dissolved all shadow holdings. Everything is legitimate, public, taxable. He looked at me. I also endowed a new organization. It's called the Lila Quinn Community Hearing Aid Fund. It will provide top-of-the-line audiological equipment to every underprivileged child in Harbor Glen, free of charge. My hand went to my mouth, the hearing aid, the backpack that Sammy had dangled, the one I had been willing to get beaten for. He'd taken that moment of pure terror and turned it into a promise for the whole city. The next day was a blur of official business. We went to City Hall, not for a trial, but for a simple, quiet civil proceeding, a lawyer. Not Martin Shaw, but a new, bright-eyed woman from the city. Explained the documents. "Mr. Kovac's assets are being seized by the state," she explained, "but a portion has been diverted, by court order, to a victims' restitution fund. As the primary witnesses, a trust has been established for your daughter." It wasn't millions. It wasn't Mafia money. It was a secure, clean, legitimate college fund, enough for her to go anywhere, be anything, without the weight of debt I had carried my whole life. "Lila," the lawyer said gently, "you just need to sign here or a thumbprint is fine." Lila looked at me, a little scared of the big, formal room. I nodded. She pressed her thumb to the ink pad and then onto the document. Cassian knelt beside her. He didn't speak. He signed, his large, calloused hands moving with surprising grace. "You're the captain of this ship now," he signed. "Can I—" He paused, searching for the sign. "Can I be your first mate?" Lila looked at the sign, confused. Then she looked at me. I translated. "He's asking if he can be your partner, your first mate." A huge, mischievous grin spread across her face. She looked at Cassian, this tall, intimidating man, and she laughed, a real, high-pitched giggle that echoed in the quiet room. She nodded vigorously. "Yes, first mate." He smiled, that rare, genuine smile, and gently tapped her nose. That evening, we were back at the Spire. Just us. Elena was gone. Her job done. Lila was asleep in the downstairs bedroom, the first time she had ever slept in a room by herself, her whale keychain on the nightstand. The air was cool. Cassian and I were standing on the narrow observation deck that wrapped around the lantern room. The wind was gentle, just a whisper, carrying the smell of the sea. We stood in silence, shoulder to shoulder, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the glass-flat water in shades of orange and violet. "It's over," I said softly. "No," he said, turning to me. "It's just beginning." He reached into the pocket of his coat. He wasn't wearing the sling anymore. The stitches were healing. He pulled out a small, simple wooden box. It was worn, dark wood, smooth from years of being handled. "My father," he said, his voice quiet, "gave this to my mother. He made it on his first long voyage. He said it held the only thing he owned that was more valuable than his ship. He opened it. There was no diamond. There was no flashy $1,000,000 stone. It was a simple, wide band of platinum. It looked old, strong. I looked closer, and I saw the inscription on the inside. 2 words. Safe Harbor. My breath caught. He didn't kneel. He didn't make a grand gesture. He just stood there, his body parallel to mine, his warmth a solid line in the cool air. He took my left hand. He looked into my eyes, and his gaze was the same one from the parking garage, the one that had cut through my terror and seen me. "Look at me," he said, his voice the same deep, grounding rumble. "You're not alone. You never will be again." He held up the ring. "Mara Quinn, will you give me the privilege of calling you wife, today, and for every sunrise after this one?" The tears came, but they weren't the tears of fear or adrenaline. They were tears of relief, of arrival. I put my hand flat on his chest, right over the steady, strong heartbeat I had learned to trust. I felt its rhythm, solid as the lighthouse itself. I didn't say yes because he saved me. I didn't say yes because he was rich. I said yes because, for the first time in my life, I wasn't running. I was anchoring. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes." He slid the ring onto my finger. It was a perfect fit, heavy, solid, real. He raised my hand to his lips and kissed the ring, his eyes never leaving mine. He leaned in, and the kiss was nothing like the one in the rain or the desperate one after the warehouse. It was a promise. It was slow, and it was deep, and it was final. He held my face in his hands, and I held his. My fingers laced behind his neck. We didn't hear the door slide open. We just saw the flash of movement in the glass. We broke apart and looked. Lila was standing in the doorway, wrapped in her blanket, her hair a mess from sleep. She was watching us, a small, sleepy smile on her face. She held up her hand. She pressed her thumb to her chest, then her index and pinky fingers, and then pointed at us. "I love you." My heart felt like it was going to burst. That night was different. The storm was gone. The fear was gone. There were no more shadows. We were in the lantern room, the fire burning low, the blankets from the sea chest piled on the deep sofa. The lighthouse beam swept past, a slow, steady rhythm, like a heartbeat, white, dark white. He touched me with a reverence that made me tremble. It wasn't the desperate need of the night after the warehouse. It was a slow, quiet discovery. His fingers, calloused from ropes and steel, traced the line of my collarbone, the curve of my shoulder, as if he were memorizing me. The sweep of the light painted us in strokes of white, illuminating the goosebumps on my skin, the look in his eyes. He learned the language of my body, just as he had learned my daughter's. His lips, warm and gentle, found mine, found my neck, found the hollow of my throat. Every touch was a question. Every breath I released was an answer. There was just the soft whisper of fabric, the sound of our breathing mingling with the distant sound of the surf, the warmth of his skin against mine. It wasn't a rescue. It was a merger. It was 2 halves of a storm, finally finding their harbor. I woke in the dark, just before dawn. I was wrapped in his arms, my head on his chest. The radio we'd played that first night was still on the table, humming with soft static, and then, through the speaker, I heard it. A sound from across the harbor, a distant 2-note whistle, the train. The sound that had once been a signal for a crime. But now, it was just a train, a sound in our city. Cassian stirred, his arm tightening around me, pulling me closer. He was half asleep, his lips brushing my hair. "Wife," he murmured, his voice thick with sleep. I smiled into the darkness, my hand covering his over my heart. I settled in, my anchor holding fast. "Husband," I whispered back. Outside, the waves of Harbor Glen, calm and steady, brushed against the shore. Thank you so much for listening to our story. We would love to hear your thoughts, so please comment below and let us know where in the world you're listening from. Your support means everything to us. If you enjoyed this journey, please subscribe to Mafia Boss Stories. Give this video a like and hit that hype button to help us share this story with even more people. We'll see you in the next one.